بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. In the last two sessions that I have been fortunate enough to attend, these sessions, I have tried to speak a little about some of the conditions that one has to, some of the approaches that one has to be aware of in order to approach the Quran profitably, to understand the message, or to begin to understand the message of the Quran. Certain fundamental requirements have to be met, and one has to be aware of. And I had mentioned in the last session, I think, that in the next one, which I was hoping would be on Saturday, that we will speak a little about some of the conditions for what the Quran has to say about itself, and what conditions it requires us to fulfill in order to be able to access what it has to offer. And that is given to us right in the beginning of the Mus'haf, in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah. If you reflect on these ayat, they tell us precisely this, that Allah, it begins by saying Alif Lam Mim, and the fundamental, one of the reasons that the scholars have given for the existence of the huruf muqatta'at, Alif Lam Mim and Ha Mim and Ayn Sin Qaf and Kaf Ya Ayn, so these letters that are joined, and they are recited as individual letters, but then the rules of recitation are such that they are supposed to be the same rules that apply to the words and sentences, etc., in terms of recitation, have to be applied to these letters also. So they are essentially, of course, they are part of the Quran, and you get the same reward for reciting these letters as you get for reciting the other words and phrases and sentences and ayat, but their meaning is not accessible to us. We don't, for the most of the ulama, or scholars, they agree, and the mufassirin, the people of tafsir, they agree that these words are such, they are from the mutashabihat, i.e. their meanings, what the meanings that they convey are not accessible to us, and definitely they are not accessible to linguistic ability and aptitude. If one knows the Arabic language, one can understand the rest of the content of the surah, but these letters are not accessible to us. And that just immediately sets the tone, in a manner of speaking, as some of the mufassirin have mentioned, that the guidance of the Quran is not linked necessarily to its language completely. Of course, language as a medium of communication has been used to deliver the guidance and to sort of contain the guidance in. But just by looking at the language of the Quran, just by approaching the Quran from a linguistic perspective, one cannot be sure and certain that one would receive and one would be able to unlock its guidance. And so these words serve to emphasize that particular point, that you know what Alif Lam Mim is. Alif is a letter, Lam is a letter, Mim is a letter. Collectively you recite them as though you're reciting any other ayat of the Quran, but you don't really know what they actually mean. And so right at the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, and then of course at regular intervals in the Quran, this message is sort of reinforced. And then after that, we move on to the next ayah, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. And it's curious, and many people have tried to reflect on this, that why is it ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ, why is it not هَذَا الْكِتَابُ? for us, the printed mushaf is there. In fact, it's on our apps, on our phones, and etc. So one can easily say this book, right? One can easily pick up a copy of the mushaf and say this book, and that makes sense to us. But ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ does not make sense to us. That book, why that? Why not this and why that? And if you think about it, when the Quran was being revealed, Mus'haf didn't exist. The Mus'haf came into existence much later as a codex of the collected Quran that was then copied and passed on, and people owned and people read from, etc. In the beginning during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, there was no single official codex of the Quran. It was compiled later. And even the compilation during the time of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, the collection of the Quran, was not, it was just collected. There was a whole process, and we don't have time to go into that now. But when it was collected, it was not compiled into a form of a codex. It was just they collected the parchments or the leaves or the stone or whichever it was written on. Everything was collected, put together in a sack, and kept in one place. It was not consulted again, ever. And only in the time of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, when a different kind of problem arose, that was then taken out, and then the process of, in many respects, a similar process was undertaken, and eventually that resulted in the formation of the codex of the Mus'haf, and the Mus'haf has then since then continued, of course, with the advent of the printing press, etc., on a much larger scale than it was earlier. But the point is, at the point of the revelation of the Quran, the Kitab, Al-Kitab, as we know it, as we call it, we refer to it as the book, it doesn't exist. It did not exist as and especially since the process of revelation was incomplete, so the idea of a complete book was not even relevant. So what does this mean? And so what did Al-Kitab mean to them? This is a question, and one can reflect upon it, and many people have tried to. But some of the Mufassirin have said, and that seems to be to make sense, is that the ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ, that book, that is referring to the book as it exists in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, in the preserved tablet, in the Alam al-Ghayb, above the heavens, and from which, of which our Musahif are facsimile copies. And so, when the Quran says ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ, there is no doubt in the book, i.e. in the book as it exists in the knowledge of Allah, and of course as it exists on us today, the book as we have it. There is no doubt in it. There can be no doubt in it, because the original book itself is in the preserved tablet. No doubt can ever enter it, and so if we find that there is a doubt in the book, or it occurs to our minds that there is a doubt in it, it is either due to our misunderstanding of the book, or not being able to have understood what the book is trying to say, etc., for whatever reason. But La Rayba Fi is to emphasize that this is not a book like any other. Because any book, if you pick up any book, different people can get different understanding out of it. I can understand the message of a particular book differently than somebody else. And it will depend on our backgrounds, it will depend on our understanding, depend on our, the mindset with which we are approaching the book, etc. All these things will be important factors in our understanding of a particular book. But this book, Allah is saying, this is a book in which no such thing can occur. Why? To us it seems it's a book like, if you take it as a linguistic text, as a book that is written in Arabic language, and everybody approaches it, then people have been trying to approach it, particularly throughout time, in fact, and arriving at conclusions that don't seem to be very much in line with what others have understood. And saying, well, look, and that becomes a form of doubt, a form of confusion, becomes a source of confusion for others. And then it means that this verse is not true. La rayba fi is not true, because evidently there is doubt. But this is the problem is this, that we have understood the Quran, or when I say we, it does not mean this group, but generally we have understood the Quran to be a book, a linguistic text that can be accessed based on linguistic aptitude and ability, and its meaning or its purpose can be achieved. The purpose of revelation can be achieved simply by accessing it as a book, whereas that is not the case, as the next verse makes clear. The next verse says, so what is the content of the Quran? What is the purpose of the Quran? What is the Quran trying to give us? It says huda. It is a book of guidance. It is trying to impart guidance, and this guidance is universally available. It's available to everyone. It's contained in the book, but not necessarily in the only way to approach it is not necessarily a linguistic one. I.e., when you approach the book linguistically, doesn't mean that you will be able to unlock its guidance. So it's like a historian writing, for example, let's say about a certain period, and he in the preface to the book he will make it clear that this book is a book. Of course, one doesn't need to. The title would give the sense away of what the content of the book is. But generally, either explicitly or implicitly, the genre of the book or the content of the book will be given either in the title or in the preface. And then, but not everybody. For example, if it's a book in algebra, if somebody who's clueless about algebra, like myself, they would not be able to derive any benefit from a book which is a textbook in algebra. So then it's the responsibility of the author to specify to some extent, either again explicitly or implicitly, what the conditions are for accessing the book or the content of the book. And similarly, if you look at it at the Quran, it has done that perfectly clearly right in the beginning by saying hudan. It is a book of guidance. So the content, the genre, so to speak, of course, figuratively speaking, is that what the Quran is actually trying to impart is not history, not eschatology, not theology, not law. It is fundamentally, of course, all these things can be derived from the Quran and have been derived from the Quran, but that is not what the Quran is. The primary aim of the Quran is to impart guidance, and that guidance is contained in the book. But there are certain criteria that have to be fulfilled in order to be able to unlock and access that guidance or what the book is trying to offer. And those conditions are, and that criterion is that it will be accessible only by a certain select group of people. Although it's universally available, but it doesn't mean it's universally accessible. It will only be accessible to a certain select group of individuals who fulfill the condition of accessing it, and that condition is lil muttaqeen. It is a book of guidance and the guidance only the people of taqwa, people who have the taqwa, will be able to access and unlock and unravel this guidance and benefit from it. Now, so what we get is that the Quran, as a book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, operates on two different, you can say, scales as such. One is the physical mushaf, the physical book, the guidance that we have in front of us, and the one that we can read and understand. It's an understandable text. It's clear cut in its meanings, and one can get an understanding from the Quran. And of course, it's a very valuable, very highly regarded pursuit. One should try to do as much of that as possible. But on another plane, the Quran operates on a different scale, and this is something which is more subtle. It's more of a spiritual kind. It's more of it's a direct connection that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through of course the Quran is a reflection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's grace and mercy for us, and because of that He has given us guidance. But to be able to understand and access the guidance of the Quran, the condition that needs to be fulfilled is not of linguistic aptitude, but of taqwa. And the definition of taqwa, because the taqwa is, of course, it's a term that is very broad and has a wide range of meaning, or even definitions. People have tried to explain what taqwa is, but there are certain hallmarks, there are certain indicators that are relevant to taqwa that is required for a particular purpose. And in order to access the guidance of the Quran, the taqwa that is required, some of the indicators of the taqwa are mentioned later on. But before we go on to that, so there are two different, as I said, there are two different things happening here. The Quran is saying that the primary purpose of the Quran is guidance. And guidance cannot simply be accessed by looking at the text. If one is looking at the text, the Quran is very clear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran says, يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. Allah will misguide many through the Quran, and He will guide many through it. So, if one approaches the Quran simply from a linguistic perspective, there is no guarantee that one would get the guidance that the Quran is has come to impart. And the only sure way of doing that is to follow the path of taqwa and fulfill the condition of taqwa to access the huda of the Quran, the guidance of the Quran. Some of the indicators of this taqwa that is essential to unlock the guidance of the Quran. Essentially, there are 5 things which are explained in the next few verses, the ayat of the Quran of Surah Al-Baqarah. First of all is iman bil ghayb. One has to have, as the Quran says, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ, those who believe in the unseen. And this belief has to be one of conviction. It's not just about a rational removal of doubt surrounding it. So basically, it's not a case of barely just about believing. Okay, fine, a parallel world does exist. No, to believe in it exactly as the Quran has said. These are the truths. The alam al-ghayb exists. This is the haqiqah. This is the reality. This is so there is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Jannah, Jahannam, Malaika, angels. All these things exist, and there is a whole system that is governing the affairs of our affairs, the affairs of this world, and of course the affairs of all reality. To approach it with that conviction is necessary to access the guidance of the Quran. So, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ is the first condition. وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةِ. The second thing, the second requirement for the taqwa that is required to access the guidance of the Quran is to establish salah in our life. Salah should become an integral part of our life. It should not just be a case of, fine, I have to pray 5 times a day and whatever time I can find. No, iqamatu salah is different from offering salah. Establishing salah is making a firm commitment to make sure that one not just prayers on the due times 5 times a day, etc., but salah becomes a lifestyle. It is something that one looks forward to, rather than just sort of barely being able to pray it and offer the number of rak'ah that are essential. So basically, making sure that we pray on time, we pray the proper, with the fulfilling all the requirements, and as well as the desirables. So keeping in mind the sunan, the mustahabbat of salah, and then trying to make sure that salah becomes something that, as I said earlier, we look forward to. We try to go back to it again and again. So not being satisfied with the bare minimum, but like the Prophet ﷺ, whenever whatever opportunity he got, he would just try and sort of run towards salah. If he was كَانَ إِذَا حَزَبَهُ أَمْرٌ فَزَعَ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ. If anything, if he became slightly disturbed, or if he became slightly worried or anxious about anything, he would immediately resort to salah. When he is happy, he would resort to salah. When he has some time, in his most private moments, he would try to resort to salah. So salah became a very, and it is effectively mi'raj al-mu'minin. It's an ascension of the believers, i.e. the person who is a believer can be closest than one can be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during salah, and particularly in sajda. And so it is something that it should become a very essential part of our lives. And it's not just something that we do because we have to do, it's something we do because we actually want to do and we look forward to doing. So that's the second condition for being able to access the guidance of the Quran. وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. And this is important, because we often, when we talk about religious matters, we are often talking about, thinking about in terms of spirituality, and thinking about like I was just saying, belief in the unseen and salah and offering. But we don't think about the responsibilities that realization imposes on us in this world, in this life, to look after those who are closest to us, to look after the people who are in need of our help in whatever way. It doesn't mean financially, it means generally to have that outlook. Because when you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you recognize that whatever you have, it's been given to you freely. And so as the New Testament, one of the verses of the New Testament goes, freely you have received, freely you shall give. And that precisely is what happens when a person becomes aware of his or her belief and more conscious of it, that seeing that you have received so many favors from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it imposes on us, it drives us, or it should drive us to fulfill our responsibility towards others, to be giving in our, to develop a character or a conduct that is distinguished in its capacity to give and share and be generous, without even giving too much, without becoming too much aware of one's generosity. It's just a haqq that one is fulfilling towards others, and it's the right of others that whatever one has, one shares with them. So وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ, from whatever we have given to them in terms of sustenance. And rizq does not necessarily only mean in terms of earnings or food or provisions. It means everything: the skill set, the capacity to, the knowledge that we have been given, the skills that we have been blessed with, basically it encompasses everything that we have got. They stem from that, so we should make use of whatever we have received in terms of giving and fulfilling our responsibility towards others. And then believing in again, it comes back to belief in not just in the books that we have been given, but also in the belief in the fact that prophecy and messenger of Allah and messengership from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been there from day one. The first man to be present on earth was also the first messenger of Allah on earth, and that it has continued since then. So basically, to understand that the hidayah and the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has never stopped being manifested on earth, and it has continuously gone on. So to believe in there are two things here, in fact. وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ وَمَا أُنزِلَ مِنْ قَبْلِكَ. To believe in the Quran as that this is, if one sees Quran, that maybe it's a book of guidance, maybe there is something good in it, maybe, but there may be something that is not relevant to me in some respects. That is not the attitude that one should have in terms of approaching the Quran. The Quran requires us to have 100% conviction that this is from Allah, it's a guidance, and there is no doubt in that fact, and not just for the Quran, but for the previous scriptures also. And finally, وَبِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ يُوقِنُونَ. One has to have yaqeen and belief and firm faith life after death, or the life of the hereafter. Often we call it, afterlife, and that is problematic in terms of language, because subconsciously what we are saying is that there is life and there is afterlife. So we are privileging life over afterlife, even if not necessarily consciously, but subconsciously it just registers that way. So what the Quran says is it's hayat al-dunya and hayat al-akhirah. So it's the life of this world and life of the next world. So the life continues. The life, we have to understand life as a single continuum, eternally, that continues since we have been given, since our souls were created. Life was already there in the alam al-ghayb. Now we have, that has transitioned from the alam al-ghayb to the alam al-dunya, and then now it will transition from here to the alam al-akhirah, and it will remain so eternally. So since our souls were created, we have become eternal. Our life is eternal. And so these are different phases that we pass through. And so once we have that perspective, what we then get is that we have a clearer view of what life means. Life doesn't mean our short sojourn that we have on earth, but it extends much beyond that, and it's eternal in nature. So whenever we are talking about life, whenever we're thinking about success in life, we automatically then try to, we would hopefully think of success in more holistic terms, in more comprehensive terms, covering the entire spectrum of life, the scope of life, rather than being sort of restricted to, sort of partitioning in between this life and afterlife and next life. The life is the same, and it's just the different phases that we go through. So وَبِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ يُوقِنُونَ. This is everybody will say that, fine, I believe in afterlife. But what is being required here is yaqeen on that. Yaqeen on this, and yaqeen is something which can be roughly translated as conviction, in the sense that we believe it to be as real, and we have to sometimes reflect on it to figure out the meaning of what it actually means. We believe it to be as real as we believe this life to be real. So do we actually have that? Do we have that conviction? Do we see the Jannah and the Jahannam, or the realities of the life of the hereafter as they have been revealed to us in the Quran, in the guidance of the Quran and through the Prophet ﷺ? Do we actually have the same level of conviction? I think conviction may not be the best word to use here, but the reality or the realness of the life that is that awaits us after death. Do we see it to be as real as we see this life? Because if not, then we have work to do. And so that is the once we have these once we have fulfilled these conditions, then أُولَٰئِكَ عَلَىٰ هُدًى مِّن رَبِّهِمْ, then these are the people who are upon guidance from their Lord. وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ, and they will be indeed the ones who are successful. So these are the right in the beginning of the Quran makes it clear. It makes clear that what its objective is, what its primary aim is, what its primary goal is, what are the what is the criterion for accessing that objective, and what are some of the indicators that will that one, in practical terms, that will make one aware of how far we are on that scale. How much work we need to do, how much what is our current state, and how we can improve on it in order to be able to unlock the guidance of the Quran. Now, the question inevitably will arise that, fine, in that if the Quran is a book of guidance, and that guidance is only accessible to the people of taqwa, isn't that a kind of sort of isn't there some kind of conflict there? Because if the people the people of taqwa have already accessed the guidance of the Quran, and so why do they need it, right? And this is this question. It's a valid question, but it requires us to think about the Quran in a different manner. We think of the Quran as something, it's a guidance for people who don't have the guidance, who have no access to the guidance, and so it's been revealed for them. It's not for us. The ayat of the Quran that are reveal about the non-believers, for example, the mushrikeen, the people of the Jewish faith, the people of the Christian faith, etc., we think they are nothing to do with us, right? So we think that that guidance is not for us, it's for them. This is a problem, because the Quran was revealed primarily to guide people to become better in faith, to be, as it makes clear, Huda lil-Muttaqeen is a guidance for people who already have a level of taqwa, and they need to enhance that level of taqwa through this guidance. So this is what the Quran, this is the primary target audience of the Quran, and us, people who already have some level of taqwa. And so the Quran, the guidance of the Quran is then to make us better. Two things. One is to make us better. Secondly, in fact, the first thing is to keep us consistent on what we already have, rather than losing it. So we have a level of taqwa. Through the guidance of the Quran, we maintain our levels of taqwa at that level. We don't, even if we don't improve, we remain consistent on that. But the ideal is that we should constantly try to improve on that and make ourselves into, try to make ourselves into better Muslims, better believers, better servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, as for those people, the next question is that what about people who are not people of taqwa, who are not believers, who are not, how will they, how can they get access to the Quranic guidance if the requirement is of taqwa? Well, taqwa, these are some of the indicators of taqwa for people who have actually believed, and they actually, now it's requiring us to, in order to excel in your understanding of the Quran or in benefiting from the guidance of the Quran, the more you are able to improve in these 5 respects, the more you will have access to its guidance. But as for those people who don't, who have not yet committed to faith or to religion, in that matter, there are 2 ways of them benefiting or being drawn towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Benefiting from the Quran or being drawn towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And those 2 avenues are Allahu yajtabi ilayhi man yasha, that Allah chooses, selects towards him whomever he wills. So that is not available to our endeavor. We can't, it's the prerogative of the divine, of Almighty Allah. That whoever he will intend to guide, he will guide without one's effort. Somebody might just be completely, not even thinking about these things. And Allah wants to guide him or her, Allah will create ways and means for them. So that is something that's the divine prerogative. وَيَهْدِي إِلَيْهِ مَنْ يُنِيبُ, and he will guide towards him who shows an inclination towards receiving that guidance. So the condition here is inaba. Inaba means sincere attempt to seek guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If one has that, then of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide that person either through the Quran or through the Sunnah or through any other means. But so the 2 avenues available for people who have not yet accessed the guidance of the Quran, who do not have, who are not fortunate enough to be guided, to have received the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One is not available to their endeavor. It's exclusively the prerogative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and one avenue is available to them, and that is to be sincere in the pursuit of truth, in the pursuit of guidance. And if they are sincere and they look, they sincerely pursue it with commitment, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will certainly guide them. So these are I think one can summarize in saying that the guidance. So finally, before the summary, sometimes we often think that why are people saying all these different things about the Quran and different approaches to the Quran, and somebody's come up with this idea or that idea or this. The thing to remember is that the Quran, when it's approached simply as a linguistic text, as I said earlier also, and I repeat, it does not provide any guarantee for that approach to lead to the purpose or the objective for which it was revealed. And for those people, we know of hundreds of people who don't know Arabic, who haven't studied the sciences, who haven't studied the Quran, in the sense that understanding his meaning and going through a program of tafsir, etc. And yet, there are people who we know to be of the highest, well, not the highest, but high levels of taqwa. Thousands of people, go to any mosque at any prayer time. Out of the 100 or 200 people, how many people there are? Even less than 5% or 10% people would be able to understand what the Imam is reciting. Others are just there and they can't follow what is being recited. Yet, they are people of taqwa. They have benefited from the guidance of the Quran. Because this guidance is not restricted to understanding its actual, I'm trying to be careful not to come across as saying that there is no value, of course, that absolutely that's not right. To understanding the words of the Quran, it's immensely valuable, it's necessary, but that is not everything. That's what I'm trying to get at. And so, despite not understanding anything of the Quran, the 90% of the congregation still stands in prayer, in humility, in servitude, in gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, enhancing their levels of taqwa. Why? And that the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala seems to be working for them, without them having access to the meaning, the literal meaning and literal understanding of the verses of the Quran, the ayat of the Quran. And so these are the, so I think the summary is this, that in order to be able to benefit from the Quran, one has to look at what the Quran is saying or giving as a precondition for accessing its guidance. Quran will not open its, although the guidance is universally available in the Quran, is contained in the Quran, but it will not, it's very particular about who who can actually access it. And so right in the beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it very clear that these are this is what the Quran contains, this is what the condition for accessing it is, and these are some of the indicators that will, of fulfilling that condition, or rather one can look at it differently, that these are some of the practical things that you can do, or you must do, in order to be able to access the huda and the guidance of the Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us all from the people of the Quran, and those among those who are able to continually increase our understanding and our access to the guidance of the Quran. From the shaitan, when they suffer an attack from the shaitan, tadhakkaru, because of their taqwa, whatever levels it is at, they realize, they get realization, they get this, the inner conscience speaks that this is not right, something is going wrong here. Tadhakkaru, they remember, and what they do, فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ, and they become fully aware. And then, aware means that in control and able to take the step that is necessary to cancel that attack, to ward off that attack, which is tawbah, which is doing something good immediately, etc. So this is the reality of this matter, that one, as soon as you become aware that something is not going quite right, you have to, rather than allow it to sort of put you even lower and put you down, you have to take control of things, and you have to basically see, okay, what do I do? It's not the problem. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't expect us to become perfect angels. We are not created angels. We have been created human beings, and so it is not an expectation that we should never falter, never make a mistake. No. We have to, it's not expected that we will never fall. It is expected that we will fall, but the requirement and what our duty is to learn how to fall better, right? So whenever we fall, what we have to do in the next step is what is important. And so if we make a habit of, whenever we figure out that something is not right, or something has gone, our levels of iman is weak, or taqwa is weak, to mention your words. What we do next is what actually matters. How we deal with that, how we remedy that, and that's what I think the focus should be on.
We'll continue on this theme on Saturday, so.
Yeah, this one, and anything else. Jazakumullah khairan to you all for once again attending and enduring. At the end of a long fasting day, can only get some endurance. May Allah bless us all, inshallah. These remaining few moments, I think it's good to keep reminding ourselves, personally as well as a group, about the value and the virtue of the remaining last moments and these nights, in particular, last few nights of Ramadan, trying to maximize the potential. Allah bless us with tawfiq. سبحان الله الحمد سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك. السلام عليكم.
Yes. I'll say no. Sorry. That's okay. I want to suggest mine. We need the non-verbal. I'll send you mine. Yes. You're not ready. How long? You're right, yeah. I'll show you.
You can put some card on it and then you cut it out and then make it. Put the card, stick it on and then just cut it on. Okay. That's so much. My text is non-existent.